A thick blanket of fog had descended upon the coastal town of Oakhaven, shrouding the quaint streets in an eerie mist that amplified the mournful cry of the foghorn in the distance. For residents of this sleepy seaside community, such occurrences were commonplace. But for Thomas Blackwood, recently appointed keeper of the Westcott Lighthouse, it was just the beginning of his harrowing ordeal. Thomas had been enticed by the solitude of the job, the promise of a quiet life amidst the rhythmic crash of waves and the cry of seabirds. But now, standing at the foot of the lighthouse, as the last sliver of daylight slipped over the horizon, he felt a pang of regret. The isolation of the storm-battered island, cut off from the mainland by treacherous tides and shrouded in an almost mythical fog, was beginning to feel less romantic and more menacing. As darkness deepened, Thomas made his way up the winding stairs of the lighthouse, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Each step took him further into the belly of the looming structure, its shadow growing larger in his mind with each turn. He could hear the wind screaming outside, rattling the windows like the bones of some gigantic creature, and the waves crashing against the rocks below, a relentless assault that shook the very foundation of the lighthouse. Reaching the lamp room at the top, Thomas took a moment to catch his breath. The vast expanse of the sea stretched out before him, an inky black abyss that seemed to swallow the last vestiges of light. The wind, howling like a banshee, threatened to tear at his clothes and drag him into its chaotic embrace. And then he saw it, or rather felt it, a sudden inexplicable chill that sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't the cold, he realized, but fear, primal and all-consuming, that had taken root in his heart. This feeling intensified as he continued his rounds, tending to the massive Fresnel lens and polishing the prisms until they gleamed like a myriad of stars in the gathering gloom. It was then that he noticed the journal, an old leather-bound book tucked away in a dusty corner. Its pages, brittle with age, whispered tales of the lighthouse's past and of those who had tended its flame before him. He began to read, each word a brushstroke, painting a vivid picture of life at the edge of the world. The journal chronicled the daily routines, the endless polishing of lenses, the upkeep of the massive machinery, the camaraderie amongst the keepers. But as he delved deeper into the entries, Thomas began to notice a change in tone. The entries became more sporadic, the handwriting more frantic, and the content increasingly disturbing. The new keeper, filled with a morbid curiosity, continued reading. He learned about strange occurrences, unexplainable sounds, and a pervasive sense of dread that had settled over the lighthouse. The keeper spoke of whispers in the night, of footsteps echoing on the stairs when no one was there, and of shadows that seemed to dance at the edge of their vision. There were also strange occurrences, like objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing as if by an unseen hand, and disembodied voices that haunted the empty rooms. As Thomas read these accounts, he couldn't help but feel a growing unease. The lighthouse, which had seemed like a symbol of hope and safety just moments ago, now loomed over him, a silent sentinel harboring dark secrets and malevolent spirits. The journal revealed a history of tragedy, of men lost at sea, and of lives cut short within the lighthouse itself. One entry in particular stood out, a stark warning from a former keeper detailing a violent storm that had befallen the island. The keeper described the relentless battering of the waves, the blinding rain, and the unnatural stillness that had fallen over the sea. And then there was the figure that appeared at the window, a spectral being that beckoned with a finger before vanishing into the storm. The entry ended abruptly, leaving Thomas with a profound sense of foreboding. Driven by a mixture of fascination and trepidation, Thomas continued his vigil. As the night wore on, the wind outside reached a crescendo, whipping around the lighthouse, a symphony of chaos. Rain lashed against the windows, blurring the world beyond into a gray expanse. The lighthouse, once a beacon of safety, now seemed like a ship tossed about in a raging sea. In the lamp room, the shadows played tricks, twisting and turning, taking on shapes that ignited his imagination and played upon his mounting dread. Then he heard it, a knock, a slow, deliberate rapping on the glass pane of the window. Thomas froze, every instinct in his being screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything but stay there. But he couldn't move. His eyes wide with terror as the knocking continued, persistent and unwavering. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the roar of the wind. Was it a trick of the storm, a figment of his imagination, or something more sinister? His gaze, drawn to the window, saw nothing but the swirling mist and the crashing waves. Yet he could have sworn that in the brief interval between the knocks, he had seen a shape in the swirling fog, a gaunt face with hollow eyes staring back at him. As dawn finally broke, casting the first pale rays of sunlight into the room, Thomas fled the lighthouse. There he stayed, huddled against a boulder, watching the sunrise over the tumultuous sea, trying to outrun the horrors he had witnessed and the chilling realization that had dawned on him in the dead of the night. He wasn't alone on the island. In the days that followed, Thomas tried to piece together his shattered nerves and sort through the labyrinth of his thoughts. He grappled with the unsettling possibility that the lighthouse, a structure meant to be a beacon of safety and hope, was instead a prison for restless souls. As he delved deeper into the history of the lighthouse, he uncovered stories of the island's former inhabitants, the keepers who had gone before him. Each tale added another layer to the enigma, weaving a narrative of tragedy, madness, and despair. He learned of keepers Ellison and Croft, who had disappeared without a trace during a fierce storm, leaving behind only their abandoned quarters and a haunting silence. Then there was the enigmatic Keeper Hawthorne, whose erratic journal entries spoke of voices in the night and an encroaching darkness that threatened to consume him. With each passing day, the line between reality and nightmare blurred for Thomas. The lighthouse, once a symbol of solitude and tranquility, had become a tormentor, its every creak and groan echoing the whispers of its tormented past. He began to question his sanity, wondering if he was truly alone on that desolate island, or if he was merely the latest in a long line of keepers to fall prey to the lighthouse insidious grasp. Yet amidst the turmoil, a glimmer of hope remained. If the spirits were trapped, he reasoned, so too were the memories. And perhaps by understanding the stories that unfolded within these four walls, he could find a way to set the souls at rest and break the cycle of despair. Driven by this newfound purpose, Thomas immersed himself in the history of the Westcott Lighthouse, determined to uncover the truth and bring solace to the restless spirits that haunted its halls. His journey took him through crumbling records, faded photographs, and whispered local legends, all pointing towards a deeper, more sinister truth. The lighthouse, he discovered, was not just a place of tragedy, but a nexus of powerful forces, both natural and supernatural. As he pieced together the fragments of the past, Thomas began to understand the full extent of the torment endured by his predecessors. Each keeper had been driven to the brink of madness by the relentless assault of the elements, the crushing solitude, and the ever-present sense of impending doom. Some had lost their minds, others their lives, all consumed by the insatiable darkness that seemed to emanate from the very core of the lighthouse. But amidst the darkness, Thomas found glimmers of humanity, acts of courage, love, and friendship that had bloomed even in the harshest of environments. He learned of secret gardens tended by the keepers, where flowers bravely defied the salty winds and crashing waves, and of cozy evenings spent sharing stories and songs to ward off the encroaching loneliness. Through it all, Thomas felt a profound sense of connection with those who had come before him, their joys and sorrows becoming his own. And as he delved deeper into their stories, he realized that he wasn't just a keeper of a lighthouse, he was a keeper of their memory. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, Thomas began to share the stories of the lighthouse keepers, ensuring that their voices, though silenced by the relentless sea, would continue to echo through time. He became a storyteller, a conduit between the past and the present, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. In doing so, he found a measure of peace for himself and for the souls that had found their final resting place within the lonely walls of the Westcott Lighthouse. The lighthouse still stands, a solitary sentinel against the crashing waves, its beam piercing the darkness for all who are lost at sea. But now it also stands as a monument to the indomitable spirit of humanity, a testament to the courage and resilience of those who dared to face the fury of the sea and the darkness of the human soul.